Hey everybody, our Grenier here with Philippe J. Fournier for this week's episode of The Numbers. Philippe, quiet week. Yeah.
What was that? I mean, we were supposed to record our end of year episode today.
Yeah.
And then suddenly more numbers came out after, a bombshell on Monday morning. So, how are you, Eric? How are you holding up?
I am fine. I'm fine.
Yeah.
Big news like that I always find very, it's odd, right? Because when you work in the news business, it's hard to actually do work when news breaks because you're just stunned and you don't know what to do with it and you don't know how to react and don't know what you should do. And I find those days are always very frustrating for me personally because I never get anything done. On Monday, it was like a very low productivity day, which...
And we
which
keep refreshing our
ironic.
pages to see, okay, has he resigned yet?
Yeah.
But shout out to the press gallery journalists who were on top of this. I mean, I know that I mostly followed the French folks, Radio-Canada. The Ottawa team is just awesome, just great journalists, amazing writers. And they were on top of it. And this is something I don't do, and neither do you. And we truly appreciate their work because it gives us something to talk about. So shout out to the press gallery people.
It was a hell of a day. And, we're recording on Thursday morning. And like we said, we had been planning on doing our over-under episode, which we will do next week. We'll have that out probably on Boxing Day or something like that. But we felt like we had to come back and do an actual episode because I think people would be a little bit puzzled why we were talking about predictions for next year when who knows what's going to happen over the next few days. And that is actually something we should make clear. Things could happen in the next few days. It's actually been a lot quieter over the last few days than I think a lot of people expected.
Yeah.
There's been talk about a shuffle. Maybe there might even be a shuffle by the end of the day. Who knows whether Trudeau has made some sort of announcement of one kind or another, either that he's staying, that he's going, or somewhere in between over the next few days. So we'll try to keep things at least relevant so that they don't get dated too fast. But we're going to try to keep it to the numbers as we usually do. But just first off, reaction to what happened on Monday.
Well, before I say something about that, just to what you said, maybe we'll get a shuffle today. That would be amazing to me to think that he still has the legitimacy to do a shuffle at some point. That's the thing.
I got many thoughts about this.
Of course, right? It's... I think we had a mailbag question last week or the week prior about how should the party choose its leaders, and we both agreed that the best way, I mean, even though for money it's better to have members that are paying to vote, it would be the caucus that decides. It's not the case with the Liberal caucus, but I'm pretty sure the
Liberal caucus is unable to make a decision. I think we've seen that over the last few weeks and months.
Well, they're well, clearly. But okay, so about Monday morning. I figured, okay, so the House will rise for the holidays on Tuesday. It's going to be a day and a half of sitting. It's going to be rather quiet, no confidence vote, no opposition day. And then this happens. In, I think, the most scathing way possible. Miss Freeland could not have planned this any better if she wanted to leave a mark, right? But here's the thing, the landscape right now, the media landscape is filled with people's opinion. I'm not sure mine is more insightful than others. I'm pretty sure yours is more insightful than mine because you're there and you've worked on the Hill for many, many years. So, Eric, what do you make of what happened on Monday and afterwards?
It was something. And, as someone who likes to follow political history, I like to think about how things fit into that context. And it is up there with some of the most remarkable kind of things that have happened in Canadian politics. On the day that you're supposed to present this kind of statement, a letter comes out that is a rebuke of the Prime Minister, rebuke of some of the key things that the government has been doing over the last little while from someone who is seen as a close ally to the Prime Minister, who was his first recruit. She ran for the Liberals in a by-election in 2013, a few months after he became leader. It was the first candidate he had recruited to run for him.
Yep.
It's very Shakespearean. It's very dramatic in that sense. And from someone who we didn't really see this in them, right?
Yeah.
Freeland is not seen as someone who is cutthroat and would do something like this that would cause so much damage, because she seemed to always be one of the people who would defend Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government at some of its lowest moments.
Yeah.
And just to see how it unfolded on the Hill, the way that these, just like the little stories, the one that was the lockup for the fall economic statement. So if people don't know how that works, in order for journalists to be able to write a full story or to have all the information right when they can talk about it, the government has these things called lockups, where you go into a room for hours, you get access to all the documents, you don't have your phone, you don't have anything like that. And then when you're able to talk about it, for example, a budget, that's when you can have a fully fledged story. You have some quotes, you have some perspective, some context to put into it. But you had, what was it? I think it was 3 minutes before the lockup was going to start. They had a note that this isn't going to happen. We don't really know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
There was people didn't know who was going to present the statement, if it was actually going to happen. When it was presented in the House, it was just kind of dropped, almost literally. It's tabled. Here we go. No speech. Karina Gold, hightails it out of the House. It was just a bizarre day, and it just showed just how unexpected it was. Right? They were not prepared for this to happen.
Oh, no.
So I think it just amplifies just how big of a deal it was, and it is hard to imagine how Justin Trudeau can hold on this way. We're starting to see more and more caucus members speaking up. There's talk about cabinet members and what they want to do. There's this talk about the shuffle that you mentioned. As again, it might have happened by the time you're listening to this. Doesn't make much sense to me to have a shuffle. A new minister just before Christmas. Here you go, public servants. Try to get this person up to speed over the next couple of weeks. And then also they might be out of the position in a few more weeks when Trudeau resigns. And when you run for the leadership, you got to step down from your cabinet portfolio. Anyway, it has been quite a few days.
Yeah. Eric, let me ask you this, though. As you said, you know a lot about Canadian political history. I think you read much more about it than I did. Is there precedent for this? I mean, there's probably precedent in the 1800s or something, but is there like something recent that you can compare it to? Because I in my lifetime, I don't remember something like this. Well, maybe when I was 5. I don't know how the Trudeau, Turner transition went, but I was too young. But
there's a few kind of events you can think of. There was obviously when Paul Martin left the Chrétien government, but that was at a time when the Chrétien government had just been reelected, and it was in not any vulnerable position, and it was just the culmination of the years-long feud between the two that everybody was aware of, right? So it wasn't kind of this shock. I mean, there was when Lucien Bouchard left the Mulroney government over Meech Lake. That was kind of a personal betrayal, because Mulroney and Bouchard, they were friends for a long time. During the Diefenbaker government, there was a series of ministers who resigned over nuclear arms, and that was at the Diefenbakers' one of its lowest points in their government, and the government fell very shortly afterwards, and Liberals came in. There was when John Turner was the finance minister, and he quit Pierre Trudeau's government, but again, it was early on in the mandate. It was known that the two were at odds with each other, and that's kind of it. You can go back to Mackenzie Bowl in 1896. That was probably the most dramatic. You had, I think it was the majority of cabinet quit or threatened to quit if Bowl didn't resign, and he did. So, but those are like pretty big moments. And if we do have a prime ministerial resignation in the next few weeks, it'll be because of this. And
it'll be the last cut.
Well, you're right. It'll be the last straw, right? But it is just going to be. It was a historic week. Whatever happens over the next little while, it was a historic week.
I mean, I was wondering for a little while there. It doesn't seem like it's happening, although we could be surprised. I mean, these people are talking and are texting and calling each other, I'm sure, but I was slowly expecting a Canada debout or something, like what happened to the Bloc Québécois when the caucus said, basically, we don't want Martin Ouellet anymore. We're just going to change parties or sit as independents. I was kind of expecting all these MPs, Liberal MPs, who are calling on the resignation, sit as independent, leave the caucus, do something that's meaningful. But I understand that it's a big step and that you still have some loyalty to the brand, to the party, even though you want to change leaders. Okay, so before we get into the numbers, because we did have some new numbers following this news, Eric, does that change, in your view, the date of the next election?
It depends on what happens.
It's a trick question, but what do you think?
If Trudeau does not resign,
Oh my God.
it to me moves it up. I know that the NDP might still have some qualms about handing the keys over to Pierre Poilievre, but it feels like at some point they will have run out of an ability to swallow themselves whole. So I think if Trudeau still holds on as Prime Minister, we're probably looking at a March-April election with a dissolution in February.
Yeah.
And if he does resign and there's a leadership race, then I don't know. Then it all depends on the timing of that. It depends on who they choose. If they choose someone who the NDP can work with for one more budget, then maybe it does survive until October. But it just feels like the wheels are coming off this thing, and I can't. It's got to careen into a ravine at some point. I don't know if it can really survive until October.
I just can't believe it. The House will come back on January 27th, I believe, right?
Well, currently it's scheduled. If there's a leadership race or something, it could be prorogued for until February or March.
Okay, odds that Trudeau is still Prime Minister and leader of the Liberals on that day. Like when the House comes back, he stands on his post and he's speaking as head of the government. What do you think?
Well, I'd say that's still probably almost 100%.
What? Really? Oh my God.
Well, I think that if he resigns, he'll still be Prime Minister until he's chosen.
Okay, yeah,
as
okay.
his
But
replacement.
you know what I mean, though.
Okay.
If he announces resignation, okay. But that he just stands there as if like the emperor has no clothes, but it's still leading the government.
It should be 95% that he is gone.
That's incredible.
It should be 95% that he's resigned. But I don't know. It seemed like he should have resigned after Toronto St. Paul. It seemed like he was going to resign after La Salle et Mal Verdun.
Well, yeah. I mean,
but if you asked me like what are the odds, I'd give 25% that he hasn't resigned by then.
Wow. Logic is out the window. I mean, we sound like a broken record, but this is even more the case than it was in weeks prior. I'm floored that Thursday morning, December 19th, is still there. I mean, I was told by someone near the Liberals that there is value, there is something to be said to have a leader, a steady hand on the wheel that is not into roller coaster mode all the time and that takes bad news stoically, you would say, but up to a point. Right? You don't want the leader to overreact to every little bit of news, bad news that comes your way. But at some point, again, vet by 1,000 cuts. How many cuts do you need? We'll get into the polling that we had, but we just saw Abacus data release the worst poll so far for the Liberals. Well, I mean, aside from one Main Street Research a month ago, but from the Abacus rolling poll, not the rolling poll, but the continuous poll that they do. The omnibus that they have. 45% Conservative, 20 Liberal, 18 NDP. And when you look at the regionals, they're absolutely awful for the Liberals. I mean, distant third place everywhere west of Ontario. What was it, 23 points behind the Conservatives in Ontario. Third in Quebec, and by a fair margin, even though
a clear third.
Yeah, clear third. The wheels are falling. I mean, and also Atlantic Canada. I mean, I know the sample sizes are small, but there were no surprises there. And last week, I titled my Sunday update that the Bloc Québécois is closing on official opposition. I can tell you that when I update these numbers, we had 2 federal polls this week, Abacus and Ipsos. I can tell you in Sunday's update, the Liberals will be in third place. And we used to think that we knew where the floor was. I'm not sure anymore. Last week I talked about, what would it take for the NDP to overtake the Liberals? It would have to be Ignatieff numbers. Well, here we are. We're seeing Ignatieff numbers right now.
Let's move on to the numbers portion of the numbers podcast. So there was that abacus poll. 25-point lead for the Conservatives. As you said, it's the widest that abacus has ever found. And aside from that one poll that you mentioned, that Main Street one that we talked about a few weeks ago that had the new methodology, this is the worst poll from anybody. So this is the second worst poll, if you want to say it that way. A 25-point lead for the Conservatives. Some people might have been surprised that the Liberals were still at 20 based on how bad of a day they were having and that the NDP hasn't done any better. I think the NDP performance over the last couple of days also has been
questionable.
Yes, that is a good way to put it. Questionable. All options are on the table.
Oh God. No kidding.
Before they weren't on the table, but now they're on the table. So everybody be afraid of that. It's like, what is it? Chekhov's gun on the table. It's eventually going to get fired. I don't know about this time, but the NDP not taking advantage of it. It's the Conservatives that are taking advantage of it, right? I did see, and I have to point this out. If anybody sees this, I saw an interview that Jagmeet Singh did on, I think it was Breakfast Television or something. And he said in the interview that every poll has the NDP either ahead of the Liberals or tied with them.
You can't.
That is not true.
No, it's not true.
And to the credit of the interviewer, pushed back a little bit and said, well, not the polls I've been looking at. And she was correct. Singh was not right. If he thinks that they are actually in second place in the majority of polls, he needs to look at a chart. He needs to look at a...
Yep. I have a great website, Mr. Singh, at 338canada.com/polls.htm. All the polls are there. You'll see that it's not true. So.
Yeah, no, I was flabbergasted by that. But that the Conservatives are the one that are taking advantage of this, right? So it isn't that the Liberals are collapsing and the NDP is going to be able to move ahead and become, a two-horse race between orange and blue like we see in other parts of the country. A lot of or at least some of the people who were disappointed about what happened over the last week have gone over to the Conservatives, right? So, it's going to get all the more stark, which may keep the NDP in line, but it does show that this, as you said, we don't know where the floor is for the Liberals.
There are events like this. I mean, obviously, not every Canadian voter will follow this closely, and I know I have my focus group, my close knit of friends and hockey buddies and family. I sometimes, I don't annoy them with politics all the time, but sometimes I just ask them, so did you see what happened this week? And it was not everybody. It's like, there was some resignation. Somebody important? It's like, the finance minister. But
well, Abacus did have a question on that, and they only found 19% said they did not hear about it.
Yeah, so it was widely spread, and I think many people, especially since now we are slowly getting into the holiday season. Obviously, some people still work, but I think a wider proportion of Canadians, are getting into vacation mode. But just to go back to the numbers here, the Abacus question about should Trudeau resign. We've seen other variation of this question before, but I don't think I had seen numbers so stark. So 67% of respondents of the Abacus poll that was fielded right after the resignation of Ms. Freeland. Do you think Justin Trudeau should stay on or resign? And 60% said resign, 19% say stay on. We are in a more than 3-to-1 ratio in favor of resigning. And when you look at the breakdown per party voting intentions, only 56% of remaining Liberal voters want Trudeau to stay on. That's a bad number, right? That's a really bad number. You can spin it, I guess, to say, okay, only 26% of current Liberal voters want him to resign. That's still a quarter of what's remaining of your base, right? Many people have left, and now they are classified into another category. But one more thing is that when you have an event like this, it's not that seeing the events of Monday of the resignation of Ms. Freeland, they're not switching to the Conservatives, but they won't answer polls. They will not be in the Liberal column anymore. And so it changes the denominator of the equation, so everybody else goes up, but we see that the NDP did not go up. So there were no Liberal NDP switchers following these events. So anyway, blows my mind that we're here, but we are, and I guess I will continue to have my mind blown in early 2025 because, again, logic has been out the door, out the window. So,
speaking of having our minds blown, let's talk about the Cloverdale Langley City by-election.
Oh yeah,
did you know that also happened this week
on Monday night? Yeah.
It was they put a lot of effort to try to bury that story.
Oh, my God.
It was very well done on the part of the Liberals. So we had done an over-under for the Cloverdale Langley City by-election last week, and you did pretty well, but I think that's only by default. I'm not going to give you lots of kudos. I don't think you were predicting these numbers. So the result was 66% for the Conservatives, 16% for the Liberals, 12.5% for the NDP. This was a 30-point gain for the Conservatives in this Lower Mainland riding. It's a suburban riding. We're not talking about rural southern Alberta. We're talking about a suburban riding in the Lower Mainland. A 30-point gain for the Conservatives and a 23-point drop for the Liberals and a 7-point drop for the NDP. It was pretty even. That the Conservatives picked up 30 points, 23 of them came from the Liberals, 7 from the NDP.
Yeah.
Turnout was, 17%?
16%.
Which I think has a big part of it. So if we look at our over-unders, we'd set the NDP at 19.
Yep.
You chose the under.
Oh, I didn't choose the under. I slammed the under. Like, this was... I kind of expected this. I mean, the NDP voters just before Christmas in a by-election they're not competitive in, they were not showing up. Your line was very optimistic because I think you saw the Liberals fall, but I mean, you mentioned it. It's just that you didn't bet on it, right? No, you didn't.
No, I'd put the Liberal line at 24.
Yeah.
Which would have been a big drop, but you chose the under, and they were quite a bit under. I had chosen mild overs for both the Liberals and the NDP. I want to make that clear.
There's no mild in over.
There was a mild over. And anyway, for the Conservatives, you had started at 53, and we were like, oh, that's kind of high. We brought it down to 51. You still chose the over. I chose the under. Again, just a very small under. But to me, this by-election is a little bit extreme. Like, the turnout was so low, and the results are kind of nuts. Like, you can't look at the polls in British Columbia and would have thought that the Conservatives would get a 30-point bump in this riding.
But it also happened on the evening of crazy events in Ottawa, which, again, not every voter was aware of, but you'd have to think that this would depress the Liberal vote even a little bit, right? So, I mean, what did you say? We had a private chat about this. You called a force majeure? Is that what... I mean, the over-under, yes, I'm 3 for 3 and you're 0 for 3, but our lines were not really good, but I think there's a reason. I mean, if you asked me on Monday at noon, okay, do you want to change your lines? I would have said yes. Okay, the Liberals will be under 20. Because with what happened, I'm again, not that they're switching to the Conservatives, but they're just throwing their hands in the air and says, okay, screw this. I'm out. I'm not gonna bother voting for them. I'm busy with my Christmas shopping, with work, with last minute things with my kids in school. I'm not gonna vote for these clowns today. So
I think that's the danger for the Liberals with this kind of this result. That's what it shows, that they don't. If they lose votes to the Conservatives, that's worse for them. But if those voters just also stay home, that can be as damaging. That kind of happened in 2011. The Liberal vote was severely depressed, and also didn't come out to vote because they were depressed. And this time, I think it's the same thing here. That, I mean, the Conservatives still lost lots of votes. They lost like 9,000 votes compared to the last time because no one voted. It was 16% turnout. But the Liberals lost 18,000 votes from the last time. And it was an extreme kind of result. We both thought the Conservatives would win this easily, but we were thinking the margin would be 30 points, not 50. So you can't. I applied the swing uniformly from this result
my God.
To the 2021 results.
You did?
Which isn't perfect because it does mean that the Liberals would get 0 votes actually minus votes in Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba. But on the old map, I didn't have it in place for the new map. But do you want to guess how many Conservative seats on the old map? 338 seats. the Conservatives would win with this kind of swing
With this
applied
swing.
everywhere across the country.
Uniform swing?
Yeah.
They went from 36 to 66. That's plus 30.
Yeah.
So basically, you add plus 30 to every Conservatives in the country.
Yeah.
That has to be maybe a shade under 280.
It was 310.
Oh my God.
So yeah, I think there was the official opposition was the Bloc at like 23, and then the NDP I think won 4 seats. They finished third. So it does. Why we're laughing about it is because it does kind of show how these results are exceptional. They're not something that is a reflection of where things are. They're a reflection of the Liberal vote being very unenthusiastic, the Conservative vote being very enthusiastic, and it is just a little bit of an exaggeration of where things are. From what we saw, it doesn't look like the advance vote was all that different. So that I find is interesting, but maybe the Liberal machine just wasn't getting anybody out to go vote early. A 50-point win for the Conservatives in the Lower Mainland suburbs. Ouch.
I think we've said this at every by-election, that we should not overreact to the numbers. They're interesting. There's real voters who put X's on ballots, then put it in ballot box. There's something, right? But what did we say the Diefenbaker record would be on a 343? Was it 275 seats? I think
something
it was
like that. Yeah.
Okay, I still don't think this total is likely, but I think it's plausible at this point.
Right now,
if Liberal voters decide to stay home, if they're saying, okay, we're not suddenly not progressive voters, we're still Liberal-friendly voters, but not these Liberals. And when it's time to cast a ballot, they just say, screw it, I'm going to stay home. The Liberals the Conservatives could win like 280. Why not at this point? So we'll see, but perhaps new leader, new beginning. I still think the best case scenario for the Liberals right now would be honorable defeat. That's the best case scenario. And I'm not sure what honorable means anymore because, but I can tell you that
the expectations are so low. Like, what is it now? Just that they don't finish third?
Yeah, I think that's it. Finishing ahead of the Bloc.
55 seats, well done. Like you at least get the Stornoway. That's kind of where they are right now.
I texted a few contacts on Monday, and one answer I got from somebody in the Bloc Québécois. And I was like, how is it going? How's your day? And the only answer I had was a smiling emoji. That was it. I was like, it's fine. Like, don't interrupt your opponent when he's doing a mistake.
No.
This is something Napoleon said, right? Or so.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. I think that's enough federal talk for now.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move quickly to some provincial stuff. We had another by-election yesterday in Lethbridge-West in Alberta. This was the result of Shannon Phillips resigning. She was the NDP MLA since 2015. She had been a cabinet minister in Rachel Notley's government. Nad Nenshi did not run in this.
That's right.
And it seems like he could have run and won this because the NDP vote was 53.4%. So they were down only half a point from where they were in the last election. And the UCP took 44.9%. They were up only about 2 points. So pretty much status quo.
Yep.
Almost what is that, like a 9-point win, 8-9 points.
Yep.
Then she could have run here. And the fact that he wasn't from Lethbridge, I don't know if that would have made the difference enough to overturn an 8-point win here for the NDP. But it does kind of show that things haven't shifted all that much in the province.
That's true. I read the many comments about this morning. I didn't follow the by-election closely last night. But okay, so do you think that Lethbridge-West is a safe seat for the NDP now? Would you say that? Because I think it's a good seat for the NDP. But 8 points is good, but it's not a crushing. I mean, I haven't updated my Alberta model in months. So people were comparing my numbers, I think, from August to the by-election results. Come on. But it's on my website. It did say safe NDP. I think what I said last week, I didn't feel like it's a good NDP seat. It's not a safe NDP seat. So 8 points. The UCP with a good campaign could still overcome this in a general. But we stated last week that the roadmap for the NDP to go to power eventually, there's no map without Lethbridge-West. So they held on to it. Good for them. It's going to be very interesting. We're going to have we had a resignation, right? Miss Notley will resign, I think, at the end of the month, or maybe she already did. I thought she was
effective. I think the 30th or 31st.
Yeah. Okay. So there will be a by-election in the safest of NDP seats. Do you think the NDP leader says, you know what, I'll take this one to be in the legislature in the last stretch of this one, or does he still wait for a Calgary seat?
Apparently, he said that he's open to it. As you said, it is the safest. What did Notley get? Like 80% of the vote.
Yeah.
And at least because it's the former leader, it is much more natural, I suppose, that if he's going to run somewhere, it would be to be in the seat that the former leader's vacating. So I think it's more defensible. Maybe I think he would have been fine to run in Lethbridge-West, but I imagine he will run there, because if he doesn't, that starts to get a little silly. Like, you're waiting for a Calgary seat. Like, it doesn't matter that much.
You have to be in the house.
We all know that you're from Calgary. You're the former mayor.
But you're also the leader of the NDP. You have to be in the house at some point.
Yeah.
Miss Notley had 79.7%. Did not break the 80% mark. What a interesting. But yeah. So you would think that he would go there. And if he doesn't, you better have a star candidate. You better have a good reason. Again, you have to be in the house. You have to face Madame Smith in the house. So anyway.
Yeah, at this point, I think he has to be there when the House returns. And if he makes it clear that he will run, will Smith call the by-election very quickly? Will they even run a candidate up against him? I mean, they might as well not. It'll save them some money and some effort, because they're obviously going to lose it when it's an 80% win for the NDP last time. So something to watch there.
If I'm Miss Smith and then she does intend to run, I would push it back as far as possible. Is it 6 months also in Alberta, the delay to have an election? I would say, you know what, your election will be June 30th. There you go. That's what I would do. But you're shaking your head. Am I wrong about this?
Play.
Well, they had the Lethbridge by-election 8 days before Christmas. Come on, man. You think they're not going to do this? So...
One last set of numbers we're going to talk about quickly. Probe research poll out of Manitoba. Things are going pretty good for Wab Canoe.
Yep.
We already knew this from the approval ratings polling, but they're still up by a lot.
53% for the Manitoba NDP. That's a 19-point lead over the PCs. Oh, no, 34% for the PCs. They're leaderless. They are in rebuild mode. It's still a pretty good result for the PCs, considering they're not in shambles. You know who's in shambles? The Liberals. 6%, single digits for the Liberals. We'll see that if there are local dynamics. Of course, there's no election coming in Manitoba for a while, but that would be 0 seats for the Liberals, you would think, unless Miss Lamoureux can just convince all of our voters to move into the same riding. So we would have, if that's the case, 3 of the 4 Western provinces being two-party legislatures, right? The BC Greens would be the only one left as a small party. But interesting numbers. Again, no surprise. Monsieur Canoe still in a honeymoon. How long it will last, I'm not sure, but it's lasted more than a year, and it's longer than many honeymoons we've seen. Yeah.
We also saw some federal numbers from Probe as well, showing just exactly what we would have expected. The Conservatives doing very well in Manitoba, so there must be some Canoe Poilievre voters.
Yes, there are.
Interesting.
Wow. Yeah.
That's a gap. That's a gap to bridge, but not too surprising.
Any other province stuff you want to talk about before we move to the number of the week? Is there something that springs up to your mind before? Because we expect 2 provincial elections next year: Ontario, should be first. Although now I'm not sure when it's going to be. Right?
It's going to be. Yeah, he's got to go. Ford's got to call it now. Like, I mean, he's got no time.
January 2nd. There you go. Election. Newfoundland scheduled. Scheduled for November. It could be early, although we don't know.
It will be in 2025.
Yeah, that's right. It's scheduled for 2025. But we have a question about this in the mailbag, so I won't give it too much. And I invite, of course, our listeners to get to the mailbag. We have great questions from our members this week. But I got dropped the rumor that Quebec may go early and have a general election in 2025. And at first, I shook my head. I was like, what are you talking about? This makes no sense. And then I was given reasons. And now I'm thinking, he has to go early now. Legault has to go early. And I know, I had the same reaction as you, but I'll expand more on that in the mailbag. But there's...
Okay, because I am curious, because I could not come up with a reason aside from François Legault wanting to go to the cottage early. I'm not sure what else... But I'm curious to hear what your answers will be.
It kind of makes sense, even though there's risk. But I would not sleep on the possibility, especially if the federal election is in the spring. And suddenly there's nothing in the fall. Because there's also this, right? The scheduling. You can't have a Quebec provincial election while the federal election is going on. You can't do that. But if the fall is clear, I would not sleep on this. And we'll discuss this further in the mailbag. So we'll see.
All right, well, let's move to the number of the week. Do you have something?
Well, sometimes you don't want to reinvent the wheel, but I try to find something interesting, but there's something so obvious. My number of the week is 25, the 25-point lead for Abacus data. Last year, in the end of December, my projection had a 12-point lead on average for the Conservatives over the Liberals. And you and I were railing like, oh my God, the Liberals are in so much trouble. Can you believe double-digit lead for the Conservatives? And now we're at 25, and although it's still amazing, we're kind of a bit numb by it. Like, okay, 45 for the Conservatives. They're going to win 250 seats. The Liberals are going to battle the Bloc Québécois for second place. You would expect big changes to come with these numbers. But I don't know what to expect anymore. So that's my number of the week. What about you, Eric?
Do you think we could see a 30?
A 30-point lead?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Main Street had it. We mentioned it was a bit of an outlier at the time. But could we see a 48-18? We could. It would be amazing. But 25 is amazing. So.
It is remarkable. We have not seen... We got so used to just close races for so long. Things not really moving. 25 was also my number of the week, so I'm going to change my number of the week to 1. We're waiting on the decision of one man, what he's going to do. It does seem like it will come down to whatever he wants to do, because there's no other mechanism to oust Trudeau as leader of the Liberal Party. So even if you have a full-on caucus revolt and cabinet revolt, technically... Trudeau could stay on as leader. It just comes down to whether he decides. The writing is on the wall. And the writing is very clearly, it seems to me, and to many other people, right on the wall.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so that'll be it for this week's episode of The Numbers. We're going to record our mailbag right after this. So if you want to listen to that, go to thenumberspod.ca. We got lots of great questions. Next week, we will, unless something big happens, have the over-under episode. Probably going out on Boxing Day, I think. We also have our special episode that we're going to record in next week. We're going to put it up before New Year's because it's going to count for December.
Yep.
And that'll be fun. And so getting to the end of it, I thought it was going to be a nice, smooth transition into the holidays. Not going to be the case. But Philippe... I don't want to jinx anything, so I'll talk to you in a couple minutes for the mailbag, and then we'll see after that.
Absolutely. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you very much, everybody. See you in the mailbag.